And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
All right, attention to roll call. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to the stage former Manhattan Borough President, former New York State Assemblyman, former New York City Comptroller, and now candidate for New York City Mayor, Scott Stringer. Scott, thank you for joining us this morning. I know you got a lot on your plate. It's been busy, but we appreciate you being here.
Great to be on.
So Scott, obviously it's a public safety minded program. I want to know about your public safety plan. The audience wants to know about it. We want to definitely get into that. But before we do, there's a couple of things happening in the mayor race, and I just want your opinion on it. The DOJ had just recently dropped charges on Eric Adams, right? Charges that came up, and now they're looking at potentially charging Andrew Cuomo. What do you think about that, and how does that affect the mayoral race and a potential mayoral candidate?
Look, this DOJ obviously should be taken with a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, New Yorkers are facing this moment again where yet the president will have his thumb on yet another mayoral candidate, Andrew Cuomo. And we just are concluding the chaos tenure of Eric Adams. And to go through that all over again when New Yorkers are facing serious issues of economics, criminal issues on the streets, quality of life erosion, the fact that so many New Yorkers seem to be throwing up their hands and walking out of the city. This is not the chaos that's going to bring us back, my friend, and I think everyone is starting to realize it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I see, to me, it appears to be election interference, and I don't like what I'm watching, and I'm not a fan of either Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams. They both, to my opinion, is one disgraced mayor and a disgraced governor now running for office. So I agree. I totally agree with your take on that. On your public safety, I read through your public safety plan, and I'm not going to lie. We got a lot of retired cops on here. We got a lot of active cops on here. I did get a lot of pushback when I announced the interview that we were going to have you on. And it was because of your stance in 2020. In 2020, I believe in June 4th, you called on Bill de Blasio to defund the police. Now we're years past, it's 2025, you're running for mayor, and you want to hire more cops. What's your message to those people who are critical of you, saying, well, you're basically flip-flopping, you can't be trusted? What's your message to the rank and file of the NYPD?
I would say to the rank and file, first, I honor the job you have done for the city, especially those getting ready to pension out. As you know, I was the steward of the pension fund and protected the retirement security for the men and women in the NYPD. But look, you can't get stuck in the mud of 2020. This city has evolved, issues have evolved, and let's go meet the challenges of this moment in time. We don't have to go back to looking at issues that were somewhat different than they are today. And so when you make a comment, what you really are talking about is simply moving resources to the prevention side. Now we have to do both. We still have to move resources to kids, to get them out of gangs, to make sure that communities have the tools they need to prevent children and young adults from becoming part of the criminal justice system. But John, we need a forward-thinking policing plan now, and that's what I'm here to talk about. And so
when we talk about public safety, what are the concerns you have for New York City public safety wise, both from the criminal aspect, from mentally ill, homelessness, as well as what are you seeing in the NYPD that you believe you will improve on?
Well, look, my life growing up was centered in Washington Heights in the 70s when I came of age. There were 2,000 murders a year back then. And I remember my mom saying to my brother and I, when we were off to school getting on the A train, you go sit in the conductor's car, right? And then for about 20, 30 years, we never had to deal with the conductor car because crime was at all-time low. Today, my 13-year-old and 11-and-a-half-year-old just left the house, And the last thing I said to them was sit in the conductor car because I'm worried about their safety. And every parent is feeling just as I am. So let's get to the chase. We need to hire more police officers. We have the lowest police count in a generation, 33,461. That was my last count. We need more cops, but here's the deal. And this is what Andrew Cuomo doesn't understand. When I said 3,000, he said 5,000. We'll be lucky if we can get cops to come back to recruit anyone to this police force. You know that people are out of the force. Half the people leave 3 to 5 years in. They're not leaving policing. They're leaving for better pay, better locations, better quality of life within other departments, whether it's mosquito states like Florida and Texas, or simply over to Westchester or Nassau County. So I want to recruit, but I also want to change the workload of the NYPD. We need to ensure that police officers have predictive schedules. We need to recognize that women in the police force, 20% of the force is now women, need childcare. We need to make sure that police officers are not being used simply for performative policing, right? Focused on a subway for a week or two. The press comes, everyone says crime is down, and it's not down. Felony assaults are up more in 2024, and we still see the juries out this year. So that's some of my plan going forward.
Well, the complaints that we hear often are the inconsistencies in the NYPD, right? We've had 4 police commissioners on the Eric Adams term, numerous schedule changes. Eric Adams promised the city of New York that he was going to remove cops out of administrative positions. He not only failed to do that, he added more cops into administrative positions. But cops in precincts, cops in long-term investigative assignments, in administrative positions have been shuffled around constantly. So a predictive scheduling would definitely go far, 100%. But there are issues in retaining talent that we have now and experienced officers now. Why would an experienced member of the NYPD or let's just say even a young recruit say, you know what, this is a different NYPD than what's been presented over the past 4 years? What would be the difference in a Scott Stringer for the working rank and file?
Because I have a plan that is realistic. It's a plan developed with stakeholders. I didn't pop my plan out of thin air. Been in government a long time. I know how to run agencies. And look, we need predictive scheduling, but we need to cap hours worked so that cops don't have to do these 18-hour-a-day shifts. It presents a danger to them. It presents a danger to the community. No one can be that run down. And quite frankly, you look at New Year's Eve scheduling, it's a big holiday for families, for cops with young kids, and they don't know their assignments. 7,000 cops get their assignments in mid-December. How do you plan for that? What do you say to your significant other? It just makes no sense. There's no childcare. And what is the role of the police officer? Is it simply to push paper? No, we need to really think about civilianization of these desk jobs and move more cops into crime fighting and preventative work. You're absolutely right about the precincts, but I want to see the cop on the beat again. Part of what I hear from store owners is, look, you look to your left, you look to your right, while someone's in the bodega, stealing right out from under you. You can't find a cop. It's not the cop's fault. It's they're not on the streets anymore. Everybody's in a so-called specialized unit. And that has to be rethought. And look, to fight crime, let's go where the crime is. Let's link mental health initiatives with criminal justice issues below ground, in the subways, on the trains. I don't need you on the platform. I need you to be riding with me when I'm coming out of my job at 11 o'clock at night. I want you on the train. I want to look at you. I want to know if there's a problem, I can go get you in the next car, or you're going to be in the car with me. That is affordable. That is doable. And look, hiring more cops, some people bristle at that. We're now paying $1.3 billion a year, John, in overtime. If I were controller now, I would be screaming my head off. We went from 650 million to 1.3 billion. Why did that happen? Because we went under our count so low that we're now asking everyone to do 18-hour shifts. So can you imagine if you could take some of that money, hire 3,000 more police officers, really have a recruit and retention program, and then move that money to prevention, move that money to mental health initiatives to help people who are not committing crimes below ground, but they have no supportive housing, they have no medication. Imagine if a mayor put together a top to bottom review of the NYPD and said to every officer, every potential recruit, this is going to be a new day. It's not who you know, or it's what you know. It's not going to be, hey, police commissioner, I got a friend over here, promote them. This is going to be a merit-based police department, and I think police officers want that. The public demands it, and I think the people who seek to do harm on other people should be forewarned that we're coming with a new NYPD come January.
So hiring of more police officers, we just had a Times article drop last night, basically stating that the Candidate Assessment Division commanding officer at the time, Terrell Anderson, was overriding psychologists' decisions to discard potential recruits for psychological issues. It's known to me through numerous sources that there are people in the NYPD currently who have failed not only the physical standards, but as well as the psychological standards numerous times after numerous takes, and they are now members of the NYPD. This concerns not only the rank and file, but I hear this a lot from the public, that we're not holding a high standard of police officers in order to meet either hiring goals or diversity goals. Will you adhere? Will you bring back old standards? Will you have new standards? What should we expect of a police officer hired under Scott Stringer's administration?
Look, I understand that there is certainly concern that we are not retaining or recruiting enough officers. And so there is that instinct to simply, dumb down or close your eyes to people's backgrounds. That's never going to work. So we have to take a look at that. I haven't fully reviewed the article, but I know it popped this morning. But look, we need to get on the positive side of the ledger. 8,000 people took the police exam when last offered, and that means we'll hire about 1,000 cops, even though more cops have left the system. 60,000 people took the sanitation department test. So we got to create some balance here and some opportunities. Now, you want to get people who are at the top of their game. We need people who do well in school as well. We need people who, are smart and who are well educated. I think there should be, like the military, a way to ramp up some of the folks who have really performed well in their lives to take these jobs. That's what we have with teachers and other workers who have, advanced degrees. We don't have to shun them. We have to recruit them. So I think it's a combination of things. I'm not saying that somebody, who may not be able to run the marathon shouldn't be a police officer. I think we're gone with the days of height, and different when we were growing up, but at the same time, we have to have a uniform standard and a police force that has the mental and physical capacity to meet the demands of the job. But we also have to remind ourselves that we have to go out and get these folks to come in.
So we currently have few hundred officers, as well as other city employees, sitting on the sidelines. They're currently in litigation with New York City over New York City Mayor's enforcement of the vaccine mandate. We recently had an officer who's been accused of alleged murder, where he supposedly went to Jersey and shot a love interest of his, leaving that person as a paraplegic and the other person in the car injured. That person is still a member of the NYPD, receiving due process as they await their criminal trial. A good friend of mine, Marlon Bethel, first-generation immigrant, black man, resident of Queens, rose to the rank of intelligence detective in the NYPD and was terminated by New York City Mayor Eric Adams over the vaccine mandate. There are plenty of people like him in city employment. He received no due process, was never charged administratively or criminally, did not receive a department trial, and was terminated within 7 days. What, if anything, would a Scott Stringer administration do to assist people like Marlon Bethel or in Marlon Bethel's situation?
Look, in the midst of COVID, that vaccine was a lifesaver and got the city and the country, probably the world, back on its feet. I lost my mom during COVID.
Sorry.
And I know how many people risked their lives at the hospitals. I still want to meet and thank the EMS workers who took her out of her apartment. at great risk at a time when there was no vaccine, my friend, right? And those that were warned and made a choice with their professional lives in the midst of this crisis, um, I think the right decision was made. Now that doesn't mean that the guy who shoots his love interest or loved one uh, should get off for murder. But I do think when an emergency happened like this, look, I shut down my office. I made sure my people were safe. I was the first city agency to say, let's get people home safe. We don't know where this is going. Some politicians, made $5 million on a book deal because parents like mine lost their lives. And it's a very personal issue to me. But I think overall the decision was made.
Yeah, so for me, I listen. I agree with you. The COVID was a very dangerous time. Sorry about your mother.
No,
We all lost people, and it was horrible. But the thing where I stand on it is that it really is a civil rights, labor rights issue. Like the hypocrisy of it is that there are people that have religious refusal. There's people that have medical refusals, and I understand at the height of COVID, we were out there and there were nothing. Police officers, firefighters, sanitation workers. We were out there through the majority of it. That vaccine came in well after,
Mhm.
and so when you look at it, you look at a guy who's alleged to have committed a murder, and the evidence is damning. So you have one guy, and he's working. He gets the department trial. He gets to go through his criminal trial. And you have another guy. He may have a refusal for requesting a religious accommodation. You have a female who may have a medical accommodation, and they received no due process whatsoever, just completely terminated, which violates labor contract. And there's actually litigation saying under a Garvey case which is a sanitation case, saying that they should all be compensated and reinstated of 3 years ago. So that, to me, that's the issue. It's the civil rights and the labor rights. It's not an argument of what the vaccine did or didn't do. It's just an argument of, are New York City workers entitled to due process? And what I'm hearing is one guy is and another person isn't, depending on the situation. And I think more highly of New York City than that. I think decisions were made, and I don't think they were perfect.
No,
But
no. By the way, I'm sure. Look, I was there. I was controller. I had to deal with De Blasio every day on these issues. We saw a lot of this. Look, as I said to everybody, obviously there is pending litigation. I will certainly, if I'm successful, hear what everyone says. But I'm just giving you honestly direct answer.
no, I appreciate that. Yeah,
My gut,
absolutely.
my gut tells me that was a very bad time. And I know time heals all wounds, but when there's an emergency, there's certain things you gotta do if you
Okay,
can.
I got you. So I looked at your public safety plan, specifically in transit. And correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying you want to put one cop on every train.
I want to put, and again, this would be working with law enforcement unions. Um, I would do a pilot on one cop in every train. I think you don't have to limit it to one cop in every train. We don't have to have 24-hour coverage. There's obviously hot spots that we can target. Commissioner Tisch is very focused, rightly, on precision policing. And I would work with the top brass at the NYPD to come up with a plan that works and keeps officers safe. But look, standing in place and doing nothing and not coming to the working men and women of the NYPD and saying, look, let's tackle crime again. Let's get back into doing the work that we need. Let's align policing and mental health. Let's also put a manager in place who's going to have zero tolerance for corruption at the top levels of the department. That's going to end the moment I get elected. And we're not going to even have to have that conversation again, because zero tolerance means we're going to do a whole overhaul, top to bottom, of that department. And by the way, Serpico was about street stuff, right? This is at the highest levels, commissioner level, before Tisch got here. We haven't even come to terms with the damage that was done by Adams and his cronies at the highest level NYPD. And we owe it to the men and women who risk their lives every day so that when they go out in the street, they know that the top brass is not playing games with their lives. And I'm going to fix that real fast.
What's Mayor Stringer's police commissioner going to? What assets are they going to have, or do you have anyone in mind?
Look, obviously, I respect the work that Jessica Tisch has done. I'm not going to do this is my administration card. I think it's presumptuous. And I think we also need to build relationships and see what our transition committee is going to look like and how we're going to focus on the goals that we have. But I want somebody who's going to be a crusading reformer, who represents the best of the NYPD, who understands that merit and competence rules everything else. I want somebody who understands the rank and file and how we can get the buy-in that seems to be lacking over the years because of a bumbling, stumbling, multiple administrations in the last 12 years. I think if we can build an administration, both at the NYPD and at City Hall, that people respect, I think that goes a long way. If people say to me, well, I disagree with you on this issue. And you know what Ed Koch used to say? He said, look, if you agree with me 80% of the time, vote for me. But if you agree with me 100% of the time, see a psychiatrist.
I like that. No, I like that. I like that. Could you just walk us through a little bit of your mental health plan? Obviously, drug addiction leads to a lot of mental illness, which leads to a lot of homelessness on New York City streets. What's the NYPD? I know that you have like a supportive teams that you want to build. Can you just walk us through that a little bit? Like what your idea to tackle mental health and homelessness is?
Look, a couple things. First, the officers, especially below ground, they're not trained in mental health work. They're trained in de-escalation, which is critical for policing. But we have to align any program related to safety and crime below ground to a real mental health protocol. That means we're going to need a lot more mental health workers. We're going to need to have a protocol where if somebody needs medical assistance, not someone committing a crime or a felony assault, I'm just talking about somebody who's homeless, who's suffering. We all see who they are in the subways, right? What is the protocol that takes them to a safe space? Is it a police officer just making sure if they're below ground, they get that person above ground and that's the role? No. We want to make sure that aligning with our emergency service workers, with the NYPD, and with our mental health professionals, that we really have a triage of people who can get people the help they need in a hospital, public hospital, any other form of help. And then we have to make sure that we track the individuals who after 48 hours are able to go back into the streets. But you know what we do? We put them right back where we found them. They're in the subways, they're in Penn Station, Grand Central Station, in our communities, people sleeping in front of synagogues and churches. And think about this city budget, $115 billion. Imagine if we saved a few $100 million in the overtime, and we will. Imagine directing resources to actually helping the people who need it the most. Supportive housing, wraparound services. I know these are buzzwords for people who say, well, what the hell does that mean? Well, that means getting medical attention and getting follow-up. Just like when you and I go to the doctor and the doctor says, I got to see you in 6 months. I got to see you in 90 days. And you know what happens when you don't go? They call you. They send you an email. They do everything they can to shake you, to track you. And why can't we do that for the city's most vulnerable?
What's your thoughts on actually removing people who are a danger to themselves or others, or potentially it's a cold winter night, you have a homeless guy out on the streets, he's unwilling to seek help. What's your thoughts on involuntary removal? Eric Adams is facing a lot of backlash about that. Me personally, I believe because he's doing it improperly, because he's locking up homeless people instead of bringing them to treatment. What are your thoughts on involuntary removal?
Well, if you must, and obviously we have to be very careful and judicious not to violate the civil rights of people, but it doesn't take a rock scientist to look at somebody in most cases and say that person needs life-saving help. And then that removal becomes necessary for the safety of that individual and the people around that individual. But it's not something that should be done spur of the moment, without thought, without training. And I think we can develop that with our emergency services. They're very good at that. I don't think they should go to jail. I mean, that to me is just a gross violation of their human rights, civil rights. They should go to treatment. They should go where they need medical assistance. You know, sometimes you remove somebody who in a subway because they're a danger to someone else, and so we ask our police officers to take them out and make other people safe. But in this case, we have to also spend our time worrying about people in the subways who are suffering an episodic event and they need assistance now, whether they know it or not. And look, I've been on the subways all my life as a kid from Washington Heights. We had some tough subway lines uptown, and you feel it in the trains. You know what's going on, and we need to make sure that we're responding to the folks who need it. Right now, you go on the train, you sit in that front of the car now, as I did a few weeks ago, as the sun was going down, it was a homeless shelter. It was really a homeless shelter. People living out of bags, sleeping on the train with no help, no one knocking on the door. And I just looked around. I said to my wife, "This is like a throwback. Like I feel like I'm living my life all over again." And we need to help those folks, and we have to mean it when we say we want to help them.
Yeah, totally agree. And what Eric Adams is doing now is he's misutilizing resources to arrest these people, remove them to the train for a night. Case gets dismissed, obviously, because it has no merit. And these people are back out on the street the next day. It's basically like that. He's just trying to clean up to make the trains look better.
Yeah.
And a lot of the rank and file don't want to be doing this type of work. They want to be doing work. They want to help homeless and mentally ill. They understand this isn't a crime, but there are times when you would need to voluntarily remove people. And listen, a lot of people push back on the support of having psychologists with cops and stuff, but it could go a long way if we could get a functioning, competent model. I think you could get a lot of buy-in from law enforcement with it. It would help them out if you had a psychologist or someone or a social worker making that decision, like, hey, this person is in fact a danger to themselves. Stuff like that. So that's big. Retired Chief Rob Lukash is on here. He's got a question for you. He asked, what are your thoughts on New York City Council's bill? It's co-sponsored by Public Advocate Jumaane Williams to abolish the NYPD's gang database. If you're familiar with that, and it's something you could potentially face as a mayor that come across your desk to sign. What are your thoughts about that?
I am not for abolishing the gang database. Look, the gangs in this city are really very dangerous because they prey on our children, and they're good at recruiting, and we have to know who they are. And I feel very strongly that we need this tool. And again, I think what some people's concerned about collecting data, that somehow innocent people will get trapped in that. Well, that's what a strong mayor and a strong police commissioner is to make sure that these tools are not abused. These tools are not a way to infringe on people's civil rights. And I think I would like to show this city that you can have strong policing and a very sensitive, not knee-jerk, but very sensitive mayor who can do two things at the same time, walk and chew gum at the same time.
And Jessica Tisch is now re-implementing these Q teams, right? These teams to go out and attack quality of life issues in New York City, which predominantly are minor crimes. What would be your stance for the department on the enforcement of minor crimes? We've been hands off, we've been hands on. What are your thoughts about quality of life issues, and how would your NYPD attack them?
Well, look, after her announcement came after I announced that I was going to do something a little different at City Hall if I'm elected mayor, and that is to implement what I call quality stat, to take a look at all the agencies that impact the public, whether it's trash collection, whether it's mental health issues, broken sidewalks, all kinds of 311 complaints. Take those 311 complaints, align them with the 911 data that we have, and do the focused work that needs to be done to solve those cases and those crises in neighborhoods. Look, in my neighborhood, the garbage is piled up 2 stories high on most days for a long time. By the time the garbage is collected, the rats are walking upright. I'm not kidding you. They got no shame. They come up to me and say, "Can you beat Cuomo?" I mean, we just let this simmer. So I'm going to have the first ever deputy mayor for quality of life that will work with NYPD, work with the different agencies, break down these silos. Because, look, you can't do enforcement on the criminal side without also having an understanding that some of this is not criminal. Like NYPD, step back here. Don't call 911, call 311. But here's the problem: the commissioners have to be held accountable to those 311 calls. Imagine a deputy mayor doing a quality stat every other week saying, "How many complaints did you solve?" We don't do this anymore, right? And so I think we need to have a mayor who's going to be focused on the day-to-day management of the city. And that, to me, is what swagger is all about, right? It's about being able to walk into a community meeting, 1,000 strong, without notes, without 100 cops with you, walk in and say, 350 complaints in my agencies, 90% are solved, and I'll get back to you on the other 10%. That's what people want to hear from a mayor.
So correct me if I'm wrong then. Instead of just quality QStat in the NYPD, you're talking about as a city module, and it's going to hold all of the agencies accountable to this
Absolutely.
QStat, sanitation, whoever is on that 311 system that needed to do their job, as opposed to just holding the NYPD accountable for every
This is,
problem New York City faces.
look, when we announced quality stat, I think, the commissioner, I'm not saying I gave her all the ideas, but clearly looked at this work and said, okay, here's what I can do as a commissioner. But a commissioner is only responsible for their agency. I'm going to bring in a deputy mayor who's going to hold everybody accountable. And you know what? It's also recognizing that why would you call cops when you should be calling sanitation? Why would you call, emergency service workers when, if you just called the agencies that are impacted on 311 and held them accountable to these problems, we start to solve the problems. Look, I remember when I was a kid going to district service cabinet meetings because I worked for then Assemblyman Jerry Nadler. There was this tough woman named Doris Rosenblum, and she was a district manager. She would just, in those days, there was paper. Remember paper? Before fax machines. I don't know if you remember, but she would give out all the complaints that she got from the neighborhood, and she'd go agency by agency. Did you take care of this one? I gave it to you last month. Did you take care of this? And you know what? Everyone was scared to death, and they took care of it. We need to do this now with new technology, with 311. There's a whole new world to explore in terms of using tech, using data stat to actually manage the basic function of city government.
We've been very critical of the Adams administration when it comes to policing protests that turn illegal, or actually some weren't even protests. They were planned shutdowns of critical infrastructure in New York City. There's been a huge rise in anti-Semitism in New York City, as well as a huge rise in anti-Muslim hate as well. So do you believe that the protests and the conflict overseas is being handled properly on the streets of New York City by this current administration?
Look, I think the protest is a way of life in our city, and I actually applaud it because I started out as a kid following my cousin Bella Abzug to anti-war rallies in the 70s, and I've been arrested for civil disobedience outside Mobil Exxon to protest apartheid in South Africa. I'll tell you right, straight up, it's a rite of passage. When you cross a bridge or block a bridge and you want to, do civil disobedience, there also should be an understanding that you are going to get arrested and you are going to be taken away because you can't block an ambulance. You can't block a parent getting to the child. But that's par for the course. You know what I'm saying? So we don't limit protests. We give permits. We let people express themselves. Look, I don't agree with the protests on the streets, but I respect the right for people to say it. I also respect people to have counter protests, to say what they have to say. But at the end of the day, if you're going to break the law and potentially harm someone's egress, you're going to get arrested. And that just has to be part, and that is part of the tradition of protests in New York City.
100%. Listen, we probably have 100 protests on the street in New York City right now,
Yes.
and it's 100%. It's First Amendment protected right. Everybody should protest. I don't mind, but I'm talking about when it devolves, when it's no longer a protest. You're taking over a street, or you plan to shut down a bus station or an airport. And there's been a lot of pushback on this administration saying that they're allowing these things to happen, and then that's causing to people getting injured, more arrests, more overtime, more lawsuits against cops. That's really where I'm at. It's like once it turns illegal, not the protest itself is what
Look, I think I made it clear. As
Yeah.
somebody who himself has been arrested for blocking an entrance a couple of times in my life, you have to have the expectation, and you have to, as mayor, have zero tolerance for blocking, essential streets that could mean life or death for people who may need an ambulance, may need to find their child. And I would argue that we should give people the venue and the permits to protest and exercise their First Amendment rights, but it can't be at the expense of other people.
And what are your thoughts on congestion pricing in New York City?
Look, it's working. I'm for it. I think it's going to have a big impact with raising the money we need for the MTA, but we haven't finished the job yet. There's a lot of folks who live in our boroughs who are living in transit deserts, who don't have the ability to just hop on the train and leave the car at home. There are people, essential workers, who need their cars to get here. And we now need to fix the transportation deserts and give people more transit options to come into the city. And look, this is going to be a issue, congestion pricing, that is going to continue to be updated and reviewed. I can only tell you that from the initial numbers I'm seeing, we are reducing congestion. We are adding resources to the MTA. We now have to, on a state and local level, deal with the issue of transportation deserts. And look, mayors don't control the MTA. The governor does. We have appointees on the board that I'm going to make sure represent the hopes and thinking of New York, average working New Yorkers. But as mayor, the mayor controls the streets, and is someone who would have a large say in what happens above ground on our streets. I think we can build out that transportation network, dedicated bus lanes, and the like.
We've had a couple of candidates on here, and they've said that if they're elected mayor, that they would get a carve out for city workers. Dark Side of the Moon asks you here, why do I have to pay $9 to get to work if I'm a teacher, nurse, firefighter, cop? Would a Scott Stringer administration have any carve out for municipal workers?
Look, I'm very open to making sure that our municipal workers, their costs don't get eaten up through transportation. So that's for the future labor negotiation. But I do think right now, let's just see where this plan is taking us and do our assessment, after we win the primary.
No, I think that's fair. It's most people look at it as a tax. I think a lot of people who commute into New York City, when I drive through New York City, I got to say it is, the congestion's there, and the taxes, to me, it hasn't alleviated. I know the data says different, but the amount of city bikes, the amount of sidewalks that are being expanded out, I believe is also adding to the congestion as well. What are your thoughts on the city bike program? Like, would you continue to expand it? Do you think we have enough in New York City? Like, what are your thoughts around
Look,
it?
I think it's a very essential program. Look, we have people who want very much to have different modes of transportation. Whether it's bikes, cars, buses, trains. People that we have all different ways to move around the city, and the job of mayor is to give people the leeway to have those transportation modes. And I think everyone should have a seat at the table as we navigate the streets. And no one vehicle, no one moped, no one bike should overwhelm streets, but there should be a place for everybody. And I'm going to try to put together a top-notch Department of Transportation team with a new commissioner who has real transportation expertise, clean up the cronyism, and get people to the table to think about what this city could look like in the next 10, 20 years as it relates to transportation infrastructure.
All right, and I appreciate you for being really generous with your time. Last question for me before we get your last words. Rikers just recently went under federal receivership. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that was long. That was long overdue.
Do you think that Scott Stringer as mayor, do you think your administration could properly manage Rikers Island if that didn't happen?
Look, if anyone could manage it, it would be me in this race. I've done a lot of work on Rikers. I was the one who did the calculations talking about the $500,000 a year to incarcerate someone at Rikers. 500,000. I did that data that's now pretty much accepted everywhere you go. I'm a very good manager. I have zero tolerance for games and, pay to play. But I got to tell you something. We needed to do something. They should have brought somebody in along. Adam should have brought someone in when he recognized this place is about to go under. And so I think I will work with whoever I have to get that place fixed. It's a danger to correction officers. It's a danger to the inmates many of them who are innocent. They're waiting trial. I mean, if I had a family member going to Rikers every day, either incarcerated or someone who's protecting people, correction officers, I would worry about them until they got home every night.
Yeah, and so listen, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, come answer questions for us. Any words you want to tell any of the members of the rank and file, or we got a lot of teachers, firefighters, we got a lot of municipal workers that are on this channel that weigh in every day. What's your message to overall New Yorkers? Why should we elect a Scott Stringer for mayor?
Well, let me first say, John, thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk directly to people. I do want to say that to the teachers, the firefighters, police officers, all the city workers who are on today, I just want to really thank you for your service and your sacrifice. And I want you to know, as mayor, I'm going to make sure that your health care is embedded for you and your families. I want you to know that my greatest honor in government over 30 years was being the financial advisor to the pension fund and getting a 9% return even during COVID. It was hard work, but working with the union trustees and all of you to make sure that at the end of the day, through your city service that your family is protected. It's the most important thing. And fun fact, John, I am the first city retiree ever to run for mayor. I don't want to age myself because I know I look a lot younger, but I just want you to know I will always have the back of our city workers.
I did miss that one question. You do support protecting retiree healthcare, right? When Marianne Pizzatola and the retiree union organization fight?
110%. A deal's a deal. You got a financial problem in the city. There's a lot of places you can go to solve that problem. I served for 8 years as controller. I know the finances of the city like none other. You don't have to take it out on the men and women of our frontline city workforce. It's ridiculous.
All right, Scott, we appreciate it. I know you got a busy day. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you for coming on, and we wish you luck.
Thank you, man. Talk to you soon.
Bye. Take care. Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it. He came on here. He answered the questions. He answered honestly. Whether you like them, whether you don't, you got to respect it. So, appreciate all you guys for being professional, asking professional questions. A couple of things right before we get off. I'm just actually going to go on one thing. I just want to go back on this inspector who let recruits fail the psychological exam to join the NYPD. This article that comes out by way of the New York Times. So a lot of people are beating up Terrell Anderson over this. Listen, I just think he was a pawn in the system. This is something that's been going on for years. This is something that former Deputy Commissioner of Equity Inclusion, Tanya Meisenholder, had spoke about on a podcast. Actually, in 2020, she was on a podcast, which I've put out on my social media, where she stated that the NYPD was having problems with men, particularly black men, passing the psychological exam. And so she didn't say what they did, but she alluded to the fact that basically they lowered standards in the psychological exam to meet those diversity goals. So I don't think Terrell Anderson's alone in this at all. I think this is something that's been going on. There's currently members of the NYPD who have failed the psychological exam numerous times. I'm talking upwards of 3 times, and are now members of the NYPD. It's a problem. Are there times when there are psychological exams? The failures of them are ridiculous. Absolutely. I know people who have failed for having a red cup summons in college, athlete, good kid, never got in trouble, got a summons for drinking a beer and disqualified from the NYPD because he said he has a drink or 2 on the weekend. So could it be overzealous? Could it be abused? Yeah, it could. It could be abused to meet diversity standards as well, too. So if there's a problem with a particular psychologist or there's a problem with the exam, why an executive would stick their neck out to say, oh, no, it's on me. I'm going to override that psychologist. I'm going to override that exam. I don't think it's a good look. It's not something I would want to put my name to. I think it's something that really needs to be looked into. We spoke about this earlier, like a few weeks earlier. We spoke about Terrell Anderson being removed, and there was some other issues there, not besides this. When we talk about criminality, there's also some talk that there were members who actually had gun charges, convicted on gun charges, that were also allowed in. So it's not just a lowering of standards for a particular group. Once the standard's lowered, like you might lower the standard to say, hey, we need more male blacks, and we're having a problem with male blacks passing the psychological exam. But once you lower that standard, now that standard's lowered for everyone, and you're going to get some people who probably shouldn't be NYPD cops. And, from that case in Jersey, it really makes me raise my eyebrow. What did his psychological exam look like? Were there any phone calls? How'd that happen? Pat Donahue says it here. The NYPD psychiatrist that was failing certain ethnic candidates wound up shooting her husband. Maybe the stress of her affair with a high-ranking department executive got to her. FYI, true story. Pat Donahue is not. He jokes around a lot, but he ain't joking around here. This is something that happened. Tim Silva, he's watching from Mykonos, Greece today. Not a fan of Stringer. Can't believe he stood next to the AG chanting with her. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that move either. Totally agree with you, Tim. Enjoy Greece. Mykonos, very busy tourist attraction. There's a lot of smaller islands on Greece that are beautiful. It's still a great place. Mediterranean's awesome. Enjoy your vacation. Chief Rob Lukash says the department has a huge history of not supporting executives after being exposed to something they want. Chief, 100% agree with you. I'm not going to sit there and beat up Terrell Anderson. People are posting his 50A. I think it shows that he was an active cop. I don't know Terrell Anderson from a hole in the wall, but they do believe he's being left to hold the bag of something that he and numerous other executives did, but not under their own fruition. They weren't just reading these things out of nowhere and saying, oh, yeah, no, this is it. They were getting pressure to fulfill these classes and to, at the same time, meet diversity goals. So, and now, again, you watch what happens. The CEA is going to bat for him. I honestly think it's indefensible. It's indefensible. Obviously, disappointed in all of the Democratic mayoral candidates. Their stance on Marlon Bethel makes absolutely no sense to me. How could you say you support city workers and not support a New York City worker who did nothing wrong? Who worked throughout the entire pandemic. So to me, it's like even John Shaw recently said it on a news show. He said we came out of COVID in the fall of 21. Which is when we implemented the mandate. So, and which we were all infected for, and the FDA said antibodies are a thing, and we could use our blood to create monoclonal antibodies and heal others, but it wasn't good enough to protect you. Made absolutely no sense to me. So I've been disappointed. I've been disappointed in the Democratic Party for a long time like that. I will say when it comes to the defund the police on Stringer, I think he and Mondani get unfairly painted, and Brad Lander get unfairly painted as the police defunders in the Democratic primary for mayor. Because again, like we showed you, Andrew Cuomo stated that defund the police was a legitimate school of thought. Now he's saying that it's the three dumbest words ever uttered in politics. But in 2020, he said it was a legitimate school of thought. Eric Adams never said the words defund, but he said he was gonna move away $600 to $1 billion from the NYPD's budget. He obviously never did that. He blew the budget out of the water. But he said he was going to lower the headcount of the NYPD, which he did. He also said what Scott Stringer's saying now. He said that he was going to remove people out of administrative positions. Jessica Tisch is saying the same thing, yet we just watched one of her first promotion ceremonies, a detective get promoted to first grade out of the sanitation liaison unit. Sounds pretty administrative to me. Doesn't sound like anything we need members of the NYPD for me. And there have been numerous I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I'm sorry. There have been numerous administrative positions created under the Adams administration. So not only did he not fulfill that promise, he actually doubled down on what he was complaining about. So, administrative positions rose. He also stated that he was gonna bring down the amount of staff that would be needed to police protests or large scale events. He's like, you're at these parades, you have all these cops standing around doing nothing. They don't need to be there. Not a good take. He also said that he was going to not have a security detail, and he has the largest security detail out of any other mayor. And my point in bringing all of this is that, like, every member on the Democratic line in 2020 was a member of the defund the police movement. There's not one. The only one, with the exception, of Whitney Tilson, and it's only because he really wasn't in the public eye. I don't really know where he was in 2020. He came on the show. We talked about it. I don't know where he was in 2020. He wasn't in the public eye like they were. When we talk about when we talk about public safety with Democrats, I think their position's hypocritical. I like Scott's plan. I like when you read through it. I like what I'm reading. Will it happen? I raise my eyebrows on. Pat Donahue says the sanitation liaison phrase promotion was patronage for Tisch and Schofield as the SMY commissioner. Absolutely, it was. It was more of the same. It wasn't, but we were told it was merit based when it wasn't. It was, you're my friend, so I'm going to promote you. Ron Layson, who was in the candidate assessment division, he said, excessive pressure to make the number of a class is difficult, but you must have integrity to say sorry. This is what we could come up with by maintaining standard. Yeah, but I mean, in NYPD currently, they tell you that your thoughts are welcome. We respect diversity. We respect diversity of opinion. We respect diversity of thought. And that's how you make a holistic, great organization. But it's really not the case. I mean, it wasn't the case for me as a Roman Catholic, as a male, as a white male. It wasn't the case for me. My voice was basically being shut out under the guise that we were a systemically racist department, that this was a systemically racist country. You see people like Sal Greco, who were openly vocal about their support for Donald Trump and what happened to them in 2020. He was illegally fired from the NYPD for absolutely no reason, targeted and then fired on drummed up charges. So no, the NYPD currently doesn't support diversity of thought. It's do what we say. So I agree with you 100%, Ron. And I said I was always highly effective in my jobs. So I was always able to kind of push back at certain things. But there are certain things you just can't push back at. And I believe this is one of them. I believe when it comes to hiring these classes or making sure the classes are diverse, or like we see, like you could get due process for potentially murdering someone, but not if you push back at a citywide mandate. It's like, there's certain things you can't push back at. I think this is one of them. I think Terrell Anderson would have lost his career if he didn't do it, if he didn't follow that protocol. I think he would have been targeted, and they would have pushed him out as well. I don't think he would have went much further. But, like I said, unfortunately, integrity sometimes it's going to put you in a bad place. I mean, it certainly has made a lot of enemies for me, for me just saying how I feel, So it's so life after the job. I don't know that this is true, but he says, "Good morning, John. Anderson allowed Epps' nephew into the academy with a firearm arrest in the past. Was there a conviction there? I don't know. It does matter to me, right? Because you can't say, oh, well, he was arrested one time for a firearm. It's like, all right, well, but did he really have a firearm? Was he convicted? What was the case? What was the circumstance? Is he a known gang member? Like, there's a lot of things there. There are other people. That's not like a one-off. There are people who have been arrested for horrible crimes who were found not guilty of, who were members of the NYPD. I mean, I think that's right. I told you guys I've been arrested twice. I was allowed to join the NYPD. I was arrested twice in my youth. I made mistakes. I could have easily been in a car with someone and I had no idea they had a gun, and they dumped a gun on the floor of the car. And next thing I know, I'm getting a CPW charge. Could have easily happened to you. Grew up in New York City. Could easily happen to you. Or you're just standing in a park. Cops come. Someone tosses a gun. You don't run. And next thing you know, you got a gun charge. And you're like, I didn't even know these kids. I was just playing basketball. Happened to me over graffiti. Thank goodness, not a gun. So there's a lot of things with that. So Ron Layson says 80 cases is supposedly how many he overrided. And he says it's inexcusable and would love to know the demographics of the overrides. I would almost 100% guarantee they're either women or they're black and brown. I would almost guarantee out of those 80 cases that were overridden by Terrell Anderson, there was not one member who was white unless they were connected to a chief or had a certain last name that you know. I would say the overwhelming majority of those cases. And by the way, like let's talk about it. Let's talk about the hiring practices in the NYPD. It's racist. It's discriminatory. Let's talk about the promotional practices of the NYPD. It's racist. It's discriminatory. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Do you ever read that mission statement? Did you ever read it? I read it when it first came out. I was like, this violates the first page of the patrol guide where it says we can judge people based upon their race, gender, or ethnicity. But here we're saying that because of someone's race, gender, or ethnicity, we're either going to promote them, move them into positions, hire them. There's a lot of things. That it's just New York City's lost, man. And I don't know, man. I still say we're on that downward spiral and we're going to continue to head downward. Thoughts and prayers to the couple that lost their life yesterday in Washington, D.C. Supposedly they were murdered, a Jewish couple. They were murdered, and the person who murdered them supposedly screamed "Free Palestine." Again, these attentions, this is an overseas conflict. Why it's being fought out on the streets of America, I have no idea. It shouldn't go in either direction. Like, this is unacceptable. I agree with the right to protest. I agree with the right to peaceably protest. I agree with the right to even civil disobedience where, hey, I'm going to get arrested. Like, I think this is bullcrap. Let's fight this out in law. But it's civil disobedience. It's not punching cops in the face and spitting on them and resisting arrest, which is what we've been seeing. I really got nothing else. Kind of hard to run the show by myself. So we're going to wait till tomorrow, the roundtable, to get into everything else. We're going to have Marlon Bethel on there. Sal Greco is going to join us. First time in a while. Pretty hard hitting. And then, we're going to keep coming at you. We got a few more candidates that have requested to come on. I'm trying to get them all on before their primaries come up in June. So we'll keep doing that. And, we're going to keep pushing on. If you guys haven't watched, Ron Layson had a great interview yesterday with retired NYPD Inspector Rob Nappy. He's often a contributor on the Finest Unfiltered. Definitely go back, check that interview out. And Sal Greco, he'll be coming up at you at 13:05 today. Definitely check that out on the Finest Unfiltered at YouTube. And he's going to have a mayor from Butler, Pennsylvania on. Young mayor, dynamic mayor. and they're gonna be discussing the incident that happened in Butler, PA, with Donald Trump, and I think we're gonna discuss a lot more about that on Friday as well. So I'm looking forward to the roundtable. I appreciate all you guys for being on here. Thanks for the support as always, and let's keep rocking out. Find us on Unfiltered. We'll be back at you at 13:05. Check out the Sal Greco show.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.